All right, stop the tape. We need to talk about the biggest heist of the 21st century. It wasn't a bank job, it was a country job. And the mark wasn't some naive pensioner. It was the single most respected, most feared economic machine on the planet, Germany. For your entire life, you've known the rules. German engineering is the best. German cars are kings. German factories print money. It was the law of physics. Their trade surplus wasn't just healthy, it was the world's largest, a towering $310 billion at its peak. They were the export Weltmeister, the undisputed export champion. Well, physics just got rewritten by the same people who wrote the old rules. Look at the numbers now. They're not just bad. They're a confession. The IMF projects Germany will be the worst performing major economy this year. Again, their industrial production is in a nosedive, and a far-right party, the AfD, the kind your grandparents spent a lifetime burying, is now polling as the second most popular force in the country. This isn't a downturn. This is a controlled demolition. And we have the blueprints. 1. How Germany built its own executioner. Let's start at the peak of the arrogance. Germany's entire modern identity was built on a simple, beautiful, and incredibly lucrative loop. Step 1. Take cheap Russian gas, pumped directly from Siberia, through pipelines named Nord Stream. It was abundant, reliable, and politically convenient. Step 2. Use that cheap energy to power the most insane precision factories on Earth. We're talking about the Mittelstand, those hidden champion companies you've never heard of that make 70% of the world's specific machine parts, the stuff that makes other factories run. Step 3. Take those perfect machines, along with your luxury cars from Mercedes and BMW, and sell them to a hungry, industrializing China for astronomical profits. Rinse, repeat. Become the richest, most powerful country in Europe. It was a money printer. And like all people standing next to a money printer, they got lazy. They got high on their own supply. The relationship with China wasn't seen as a risky dependency. It was seen as a birthright. Volkswagen's entire empire came to depend on the Chinese middle class, sending 40% of all its cars there at the peak. For entire towns in Baden-Württemberg, the local factory's order book was a direct line to Shanghai. Here's the catastrophic problem they missed in their boardrooms. When you sell your top-tier machine tools to an industrializing superpower, you're not just selling a product, you're selling knowledge. You're selling the tools to build tools. You are, quite literally, handing over the blueprints to your own castle and charging them for the paper. It's like selling your neighbour a state-of-the-art security system, calling him a great customer, and then being absolutely shocked when he eventually uses it to rob your house. And that's exactly what happened. The student didn't just graduate. He bought the school, fired the teachers, and started teaching a better, cheaper, faster class. Nowhere is this more brutally obvious than in the electric car. This was supposed to be Germany's birthright, the logical green evolution of the thing they'd mastered for a century. The Autobahn was meant to go electric on German terms. But while German boardrooms spent a decade debating the stitching on leather interiors and the talk of incremental diesel improvements, China made a national crusade out of the battery. They locked down lithium mines in Africa and South America. They built gargantuan battery, gigafactories with state money. They created entire EV brands from scratch. The result? In 2023, China produced over 9.5 million new energy vehicles. They exported 1.6 million of them. Germany, in that same year, produced roughly 686,000 all-electric cars. And the gut punch, over 40% of those Chinese EVs were shipped directly to Europe. They're using German ports, German roads, and German dealership networks to sell cars that are permanently eating Germany's lunch. The crown jewel is cracking. Volkswagen, the beating heart of German industry, is now shutting production lines and cutting 35,000 jobs. Not because of a temporary recession, because of a cold, hard calculation of long-term decline. A calculation, by the way, that Germany's own engineers and sales team spent 20 years teaching their Chinese counterparts how to make. They didn't lose the competition. They trained the winner and then paid for his gym membership. 2. The self-lobotomy, trading physics for a pipeline. But this China disaster was only possible because of a second, even more fundamentally stupid decision, one that shatters every stereotype you have about German rationality and long-term planning. Rewind to 2011. A tsunami hits Fukushima, Japan, triggering a nuclear meltdown thousands of miles away. The German response? A nationwide spasm of pure emotion. In a move that economists and engineers still scratch their heads over, Chancellor Angela Merkel announces Germany will phase out all its perfectly safe, zero-carbon baseload nuclear power plants. 8 reactors were switched off overnight. The rest were given a death sentence. Let me be crystal clear. This was not risk management. This was magical thinking. It was a country with some of the world's best engineers deciding that because a 1960s-era plant failed in Japan due to a once-in-a-millennium tsunami, their own modern, geographically safe reactors were suddenly unacceptable. But physics doesn't care about feelings. The lights had to stay on. The factories needed power. So what did the masters of engineering do? They shook hands with an ex-KGB colonel. They doubled down on Vladimir Putin. They bet their entire industrial survival on the goodwill of a Moscow strongman, building not 1 but 2 major pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and 2, directly from Russia to Germany, tying their economic heartbeat to the Kremlin's bank account. It was the most reckless geopolitical bet a modern industrial state has ever made, and in Berlin they called it pragmatism. Then, in 2022, Putin invaded Ukraine, and the pragmatic bet exploded. Literally. The Nord Stream pipelines were sabotaged. Overnight, the cost of German natural gas skyrocketed by over 1,000%. This is when you felt it. That wasn't geopolitics on the news. That was the heating bill that just swallowed your vacation fund. That was the local metal workshop that suddenly posted closed signs. That was the fertilizer plant shutting down because it couldn't afford to make ammonia. Take BASF, the world's largest chemical producer. Its main plant in Ludwigshafen is a sprawling city of pipes that uses natural gas not just for power, but as a raw material. Their energy bill exploded by 3.2 billion euros in a single year. Faced with that, a CEO has one logical choice. So BASF did. They slashed production permanently in Germany. And where did they invest 10 billion euros, their largest investment ever? Into a new state-of-the-art chemical complex in Zhanjiang, China. The irony is so thick you could choke on it. A nation whose global brand is Vorsprung durch Technik, advancement through technology, chose a corrupt petro-state over the most advanced energy technology humans have ever invented. They traded nuclear physics for a pipeline. And now the bill has arrived. It's not in rubles. It's in the slow, sickening sound of the industrial base packing its bags. 3. The straitjacket. When the rulebook is the problem, so your primary customer is now your most fearsome competitor. Your energy strategy is a smoking multi-billion euro crater. What do? If you're America, you throw a few $1 trillion at the problem. You pass the Inflation Reduction Act and basically dare the world to out-subsidize you. You invent a new industry overnight. If you're China, you command your entire economy to fix it. You direct state banks, state companies, and provincial governors to make it happen. Rules be damned. If you're Germany, you check the rulebook, and then you meticulously tie your own hands. In 2009, in a fit of puritanical zeal after the financial crisis, Germany amended its own constitution. They enacted the debt brake Schuldenbremse. This law dictates that the federal government's structural deficit cannot exceed 0.35% of GDP. In a crisis, it can be suspended, but the political and legal fight to do so is brutal. To understand how insane this is, compare it not to some fantasy, but to reality. The US deficit fluctuates around 6 to 7% of GDP. France's is around 5%. These aren't legally binding ceilings in the same way, but they represent the actual breathing room other major economies have. Germany gave itself a fiscal straitjacket and then threw away the key. This means when the dual crisis of China and energy hits, Germany cannot meaningfully cut taxes to save its companies. It cannot launch a truly massive, decade-long investment program in future-proof infrastructure, digitalization, and green tech. It can only sit politely and watch its own erosion with a balanced budget, because the money isn't there, and they made it a constitutional crime to go find it. But the paralysis is deeper than money. It's encoded in the bureaucratic DNA. Starting a business in Germany involves notarized documents, multiple registrations, and weeks of waiting. In America, you can do it online in an afternoon for a few $100. Want to build a wind farm to actually fix the energy mess you created? Get comfortable. The permitting process involves environmental assessments, protests, legal challenges, and layers of federal and state bureaucracy. It takes 5 to 6 years. On average. In Texas, it takes about a year. In China, it takes 6 months. They have an old saying, Vorsicht ist besser als Nachsicht. Caution is better than regret. A sensible idea for a pedestrian crossing. A death sentence for an economy in a technology race. 4. The autopsy, a case study in institutional suicide. This is the triage room. The economic patient is bleeding out from 3 self-inflicted wounds: the China dependency, the energy suicide, the bureaucratic coma. And into this vacuum of leadership and hope steps the raw political anger. The alternative for Germany, FDE, isn't rising because millions of Germans have suddenly fallen in love with extremism. It's rising because the mainstream parties, the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, the Greens, have collectively offered a PowerPoint presentation on managed decline. When people feel the floor falling out from under them, when the factory job their father had is gone, when their energy bill is now a second rent, when they read that their pension is unsustainable because the working age population is shrinking by 400,000 people a year, they will reach for anyone who promises to nail the floor back down, even if that person is standing there with a blowtorch and a scary grin. So what do we call this? It's not bad luck. It's not a normal business cycle. This is a textbook case of institutional suicide. It's what happens when a country confuses stubbornness for strategy, when it prizes ideological purity and short-term political comfort over hard power and long-term resilience, when its famous culture-deep caution finally curdles into catastrophic, innovation-killing inertia. They had every advantage: a rebuilt industrial base, a legendary workforce, a central position in Europe. Every warning bell, from over-reliance on China to over-reliance on Russia, was ringing for a decade, and they chose, step by deliberate logical step, to dismantle it all. The German model isn't just sick, it's in the ICU, and the doctors are too busy in a committee meeting, filing permits for the correct paperwork to authorise a blood transfusion. The real, terrifying question now isn't about the specific policy fixes. It's whether the political will to even try still exists, or if everyone in charge is too busy reading the fine print of the rulebook to notice that the entire building is already on fire, Werkzeug abgeschlossen, tools closed, the machine has been shut off by its own operators. The next crisis is already building next door. While Germany engineered stagnation, France has been on a historic spending spree, creating a debt trap so massive it threatens to bankrupt the entire European project. We're breaking that down next in How France is Bankrupting Europe. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching.